People are looking to start a business. How do they calculate how they're going to make money?
Oh,
And today I'm here with.
my name is Joe Baz, and I'm with Musubi Tech. And Musubi Tech is a new company started last year, and the goal of Musubi Tech is to bring together international and Japanese tech professionals to exchange ideas, learn new methods, and also find new ways of working together.
So, Joe, why did you decide to start a business here in Japan?
Well, I was quite inspired by a lot of conversations I've had with tech professionals in my short time in Japan, where a lot of professionals seem to be divided into folks who speak English and have a community with other international folks, and then Japanese tech professionals that tend to congregate together. And through some of the conversations I've had with various members, I was inspired by a conversation that somebody had with me, which was, I love the different events that that we end up hosting, but I really want to understand, this is an international product manager. She's like, I really want to understand, how do Japanese people think about products? What are their methods for building products? And so it gave me this idea, which kind of was parallel to why my family and I came to Japan, which is that my wife is Japanese and we have two kids. And part of our reason for coming to Japan was so that our kids could have a sort of a multicultural background, because Japanese is part of who they are. So the idea kind of sprung together to say, like, yeah, why aren't we having more conversations? Why are we siloed? And so Musubi Tech was formed with this idea of, can we, Musubi, which is to tie together in Japanese, bring these people together and see what happens.
What has been the most difficult thing so far about running this business?
So I would say, honestly, it's because we're trying to appeal to both a Japanese and an international audience in both languages. Trying to communicate in both languages is challenging, and I can't say that for myself right now, just because I'm still learning Japanese. But in terms of the communications that we have to put together, there are a lot of cultural nuances in Japan and in the language itself. So there's a lot of work that has to go into it, in terms of what the experience of the events we put on, how we communicate to folks outside of these events, and it's more than double the effort, because you're thinking about a lot of different aspects of these cultural differences, not just the language itself.
A lot of people want to start a business, but it's intimidating for them. Do you think it's difficult?
Yes. I think running any business is difficult. This is my second business, and part of the challenge in running a business is that there is a lot of uncertainty, and I think you have to have the right mindset for dealing with that uncertainty. Part of it, that uncertainty, is actually kind of fun too, because there's just this world of opportunities and things to learn about, things to know about. And so I would say, even if you have the sort of mindset for being an entrepreneur, you'll just deal with lots of successes, but also potential frustrations and things you try that sometimes don't work out, and you feel like you've wasted something, and then you have to kind of go back to the drawing board. Sometimes you don't hit on the thing you really wanted to, like, launch out there. And so one thing I usually like to tell people if they're getting involved in a business is to have a really strong vision, because that is going to be your anchor when things get tough. And it's supposed to be a reminder of, like, why did you start this to begin with? It doesn't matter if you made a big mistake, or something didn't work out as planned, or you lost a lot of time, or whatever it is. You have lots of fits and starts. At the end of the day, you have to come back to saying, why am I even doing this? Is it about me? Well, if it is, then then you're doing it for your own ego, right? But if it's really about that vision, that meaning that you're trying to see through, then it makes that process a little bit easier, a little bit more palatable.
It's interesting that you say that, because a lot of people want to start a business because they want financial freedom, they want to work on their own, but they don't have a vision. How can they find their vision?
I think it starts inward. I'm going to quote a colleague of mine who, Yuichi Terada, who said, um, you want to look inside and like what's meaningful to you, like, and like, if you have a family, kids, like what kind of future do you want them to have, or what particular future do you want to have? Let's say you don't have kids, like what's meaningful to you. Start with inside, and then from there you can start to look out towards different kinds of problems that you might react to, and you might say, God, I wish somebody would do something about that. Maybe nobody's touching it, or maybe a bunch of people are touching that problem, but they're just not making progress on it. Or you feel like you have, a really interesting ways in which you can solve that problem and more. What I think is the wrong first step is starting with an idea, starting with like, oh, this would be so cool if we could do this, like create this software, create this kind of service or something like that. Because then you're just really enamored with the solution, which you never know as a founder, you never know if that will actually fit the market's needs. It could be a timing issue, could be a monetization issue, it could be just it doesn't serve the needs as you thought it would, right? Well, then what? If you're so fixated on the idea and not the problem, you have less wiggle room to then adapt and say, oh, well, this didn't work, but that's okay. I don't mind if this, product or program or whatever doesn't work, because I still have the same problem. It just means I got to try another experiment to see what kind of outcome I can get from the next idea or hypothesis I have.
So for you, how did you know that you wanted to be a founder?
I think, well, if I had to trace back to the first time I started my business, I was very young back then, and I think I was more reactive to what I used to see. And again, I guess it's a problem, but like, so my first business was a UX consulting business, and I think the reaction that I had was that I felt like all of the other kinds of agencies that were out there when I first started, it actually wasn't a UX agency. It was just like a full web design shop. It pivoted later. But so at that time when I first started it, I was just very unhappy with how these agencies treated their customers, how much they charged, how little value got. And so I had a sort of reaction to that. And that's what made me start that. Was that the right decision? Honestly, I would say yes, because that allowed me to just walk inside the shoes of an entrepreneur and see if that's, that fits my personality. And it totally did. It was exciting to learn about so many different things. I mean, even, finance, like I had to kind of just learn how to close my own books and deal with contracts. I had to deal with lots of different things, but everything was just super exciting to me. And every little experiment that I had to try, even though some of them didn't work out, it was all very exciting to me. So I realized that that level of uncertainty that comes with being an entrepreneur didn't scare me.
A lot of people are scared about starting their own business. So did you ever face that fear? And if not, why?
It took a while before I started this second business, Musubi Tech. And I think, there are a couple of factors why. One of the reasons why I exited my first business was because I was starting a family, and I was running that business for 10 years. I was ready to move on. So my priorities shifted a little bit. But I didn't have, in between that time and now, which probably was like another 7-8 years, nothing really jumped out at me as like, oh, this is something I would really love to change. I would love to make this problem go away, or do something that can contribute to a better future. And so that hit me, I think, in Japan, because of all the conversations I was just having with lots of various folks in the startup community, tech professionals, product managers, designers, engineers, and then it just struck me that.
When people are looking to start a business, how do they calculate how they're going to make money?
Oh, that's a tough question. Well, it's funny. For Musubi Tech, I first start with what is the value that I feel like my business will be able to provide. Coming from a consulting background, as a side note, I really despise the hourly, charging like, by the hour. I always love to charge by a fixed price, or, something that shows that you're going to get some value. And I think the price that I'm charging you is worth that value. And so when I say starting from the value, I'll just give you an example. That one of the things that I'm looking to explore with Musubi Tech is, what is the value of bringing people together? Not at like a networking event. We do have networking events and such, but with a more specific goal in mind. If I was to say, let me get a whole bunch of design leaders and product leaders together, because a lot of them are really just banging their heads against the wall around a problem, which is adapting to AI and seeing what kind of changes are going to happen in their org. By focusing on the problem and saying, we want to work together to solve this, I can bring these people that have this, roughly the same kind of experience, know how to know what they're talking about, but need to lean on each other to figure out what has somebody else tried in this area, or what are people looking into, or they, whatever it is. How much would people be willing to pay to be match made, for these kinds of events, whether it's a workshop or whatever, on a regular basis? And what other things would this sort of different part of the community want? Would they also be interested in some advice, like in an online forum, from members in this same community, that, a trusted network of professionals?
Got it.
So like, I'm starting with that value and saying like, okay, if I was to monetize that, when do they realize that they're getting that value, right? So if I said, well, let me do a monthly subscription. Well, it's possible they might come to one meeting, or they might even skip out, and they're like, oh, they're too busy, right? And then they might just feel like, well, I'm paying this monthly subscription. I don't feel like I'm getting anything, right? So I feel like I need to think about when are they going to get to that point where they've reached that value? And I'm not sure what that is, but I have to do the experiment. But, it could be, a year, or some other kind of model. And so that's how I think about it. I think about like that exchange of value, and when they can get it, and how much I charge is depending on how much value they're getting out of it. Like if they got that one piece of advice that changed their business forever, how much is that worth to them? Right? I mean, we're not talking.
It's like you're analyzing still, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So
was there ever a time where you felt like giving up in your business? And if so, why didn't you give up?
So, as you know, like when I mentioned how like having that vision is really important, it should drive you. But I mean, that's coming from a passion, a personal desire, and an ambition. Sometimes things in life can compete with that, right? Family, as an example. So as I mentioned, I left my first business because I was starting to have a family, and that priority shifted. But I mean, there's also moments where like, running a business can be super stressful. And it depends on who you are, right? Like, how resilient you are and such. But, for me personally, it wasn't easy. And there were moments where there was just so much stress, and it was having an effect on, relationships and such, that, there were moments where I was just like, is this really worth it? At the end of the day, is it worth sacrificing really important relationships in my life in order to chase this dream, or, ride the roller coaster, of being an entrepreneur? And yeah, there were moments where it was just like, I almost threw in the towel, like, and then with that first business, I ended up exiting. I ended up moving on from it because my priorities shifted.
Joe, thank you so much. I appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Thanks, Linda. This is
Very
great.
good.